In a quiet Arizona town surrounded by open desert and distant mountains, 32-year-old Michael Turner worked as a field technician for a local telecom company. His days were usually routine, checking cell towers, repairing lines, and driving long stretches of highway under the blazing sun. But on this particular afternoon, something felt different. As he inspected a remote site near an old service shed, he sensed movement from the corner of his eye. The area was normally empty, silent except for the wind. Curious and slightly alarmed, Michael stepped closer to investigate, not knowing that his life was about to change. When he approached the broken shed, he froze. In the narrow strip of shade sat a small Apache child, thin and trembling, looking no older than 7. His clothes were dusty, his face pale, and his eyes filled with fear. Michael immediately dropped to one knee, his instincts shifting from technician to protector. He spoke gently, trying not to frighten the boy further. The child didn't respond at first, only watching him with wide, uncertain eyes. Michael realized the child hadn't eaten in days. His heart tightened at the sight. Michael quickly reached into his emergency field kit and took out a bottle of water and a protein bar. He opened the bottle and placed it in front of the child, giving him space so he wouldn't feel threatened. Slowly, the boy reached out with shaking hands. He took a small sip, as if testing whether the water was real, then drank deeply. When Michael offered the protein bar, the child hesitated again but accepted, nibbling at first, then eating faster. Michael felt a deep, protective instinct growing inside him. Realizing the child needed immediate medical help, Michael called local tribal services and emergency responders. He stayed beside the boy, speaking softly even though he wasn't sure the child understood him. Minutes felt like hours as they waited under the scorching Arizona sun. Michael shaded the boy with his jacket, trying to comfort him. Eventually, the child moved closer and leaned lightly against Michael, a small gesture that spoke louder than words. Michael placed a reassuring arm around him, feeling the child's fear slowly ease. When the ambulance finally arrived, the paramedics approached with caution and care. The boy clung to Michael's hand, refusing to let go at first. Michael gently assured him that he would be safe and that the people arriving were there to help. With slow, coaxing movements, they lifted the boy onto a stretcher. His tiny fingers tightened around Michael's briefly before releasing. That moment, fragile yet powerful, etched itself into Michael's memory. The paramedics thanked him for staying and for his quick response. Unbeknownst to Michael, a passerby had recorded the scene from a distance, a simple moment of compassion, a man kneeling beside a starving child, offering comfort, protection, and hope. The video made its way onto social media and spread rapidly across the United States. People were struck by the sincerity of the moment, the raw humanity captured without exaggeration or intent. Within hours, thousands of comments and shares turned Michael into an unexpected symbol of kindness. His coworkers were shocked when they recognized him on national news. By the next morning, reporters began calling, wanting interviews and statements. Michael, however, felt uncomfortable with the sudden attention. To him, he had simply done what anyone should do, help a child in danger. Still, the story resonated deeply with viewers across the country. Many praised him for treating the child with respect and gentleness, especially considering the complex history between native communities and outsiders. Michael remained humble, returning to work quietly while the story continued circulating. Though he tried to move on, he couldn't forget the child's frightened eyes or the way he held his hand before being taken away. 4 days after the incident, Michael was back in his Flagstaff home, trying to settle into his normal routine. Yet something inside him hadn't returned to normal. He often found himself replaying the moment the child held his hand, wondering what the boy had been through and whether he was recovering. That morning, as he packed his tools for another long shift, he felt a strange sense of anticipation he couldn't explain. Then, just as he reached for his keys, a sudden, firm knock echoed through the house. The sound carried weight, serious, deliberate, and unexpected. Michael walked to the door with cautious curiosity, unsure who might be visiting him so early. When he opened it, he felt his breath catch in his throat. Standing on his porch were 3 Apache women, each representing a different generation. Their presence felt powerful, almost ceremonial. The eldest stood tall with silver hair braided neatly, her eyes calm but profound. Beside her was a middle-aged woman carrying something wrapped in cloth. And at the front stood the youngest, clearly the child's mother, her eyes already glistening with emotion. None of them spoke at first. Instead, they stepped forward slowly, their expressions full of gratitude that didn't need words. Each woman held a small, handmade gift, a woven bracelet with intricate tribal patterns, a wooden carving shaped like an eagle, and a folded ceremonial cloth stitched with symbols representing protection and family. These were not ordinary objects, they carried meaning, history, and the weight of tradition. Michael understood instantly that such gifts were given only in moments of deep honor. The realization washed over him like a wave. The mother then stepped forward, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched the ceremonial cloth. Tears shimmered in her eyes, but her voice remained steady when she finally spoke. "You saved my son," she said softly, every word full of emotion. "Our family will never forget what you did." Michael felt a sudden tightness in his throat. He had expected maybe a thank you call or a message from tribal services, but he never imagined the family would come to his home in person. The sincerity in her voice made the moment overwhelming. Michael placed a hand over his heart and accepted their gifts with the utmost respect. He carefully held each one as if it were priceless, because, in their culture, it was. He thanked them humbly, struggling to find words that matched the depth of the moment. To him, helping the child had been instinctive, something any decent person would do. But for this family, it was life-altering. The grandmother nodded approvingly, as though silently acknowledging Michael's sincerity. The aunt wiped her eyes, clearly moved by how gently he received their offerings. What none of them knew at that moment was that the entire scene was being recorded by Michael's doorbell camera. The camera had silently captured everything: the knock, the gifts, the emotional exchange, the mother's trembling voice. Later, when Michael reviewed the footage, he considered keeping it private. But someone close to him encouraged him to share it, not for attention, but because the moment represented unity, kindness, and respect between communities that weren't often seen interacting so openly. Eventually, Michael agreed, wanting others to witness the power of compassion. When the video finally reached social media, it spread even faster than the first one. Millions watched the Apache women standing at Michael's door, thanking him in the purest, most heartfelt way. People were touched by the sincerity of the family, the humility of Michael, and the beauty of the cultural exchange. Comments poured in from across the country, messages about humanity, honor, empathy, and how one simple act of kindness had built a bridge between strangers. Michael didn't expect any of it. In his heart, he was simply relieved knowing the child was safe, loved, and healing.